Good evening, fellow students. Here we are with Chapter 3 and 4. The questions that I answered for Chapter 3 are 1 and 3, and the ones I answered for Chapter 4 are also 1 and 3. So, number 1 for Chapter 3, it asks us about what roles do you think need and precedence play in our own learning process. So, for me, I feel like precedent roles play a huge part in my learning process. On page 65, it states that we learn precedents based on both direct and indirect experiences, and in doing so, we learn what to expect and how to act to satisfy our needs in the future. One thing that I have learned well is painting, particularly watercolor painting. I started painting a couple years ago in honor of my late grandmother, who was also an artist. When I decided to start painting, I did not take any lessons. I didn't watch any tutorials or anything. I just kind of jumped in head first. And for the first few months, my works were horrible and they just were not great. But I was able to use those as an example of what not to do in the future. And while today I am no master artist, my art comes out looking beautiful, and I use those past experiences to shape how I paint today. For question number 3, it asks us about what is the role of stories and narratives in creating culture. So first, a narrative is described on page 70 as a recounting of a sequence of events that is told from a particular point of view. On page 70, we can see how it ties in with creating culture. The text states that narratives offer a means of communication by which we can better understand the worldviews, beliefs, values, dreams, norms, and feelings of others. Another question that we were asked was, what stories or narratives have had an impact on me? The ones that have probably had the biggest impact on me are the narratives that are found in the Bible. I grew up in the church, and I grew up hearing and learning about all the stories and narratives that are found in the Bible. We are asked, how did those stories or narratives get handed down? Who told the stories or narratives? I unfortunately don't know the origin of how all of these narratives and stories were combined in one book. I'm not that knowledgeable. But there are many, many people who speak or tell narratives in the Bible. Who read them to me were my parents or people of the church, like a Sunday school teacher, and that's how I heard them. It goes on to ask us what emotions are embedded in them, and since there are many, many authors, you could say, of the narratives in the Bible, the emotions vary vastly. There's joy, despair, anger, grief, hope. The list goes on and on. We're also asked if I retell these stories or narratives, and I do. I retell them to my daughter because the narratives in the Bible are full of values and morals in which we should lead our life by. Things like do not steal or do not lie or, adultery, etc. These are things that we should or shouldn't do. Give to the poor, should. Steal, probably shouldn't. So these are narratives that I also tell my daughter because these are values that I also would like her to have. So for chapter 4, question 1, the authors argue that all identities are grounded in similarities and differences. Explain what they mean. Do you agree or disagree? Why or why not? So, in the text, it says, any identity or combination of identities that a person may adopt or have, such as mother, client, acquaintance, or anything else, implies something shared with others, a similarity. At the same time, our identities imply differences as well. The fact that identities are grounded in similarities and differences is something I do agree with. So, as an example, one of my identities is as a preschool teacher. And when compared to others at my place of work or people who are in the early childhood field, I'm very similar. I have similarities with them. But when compared to other people in my family, that's when the difference come up. I have siblings who are nurses, life coach, landscapers, or retired. Sorry, small goof up there. So with those similarities and differences kind of explained with my own example, I do agree with what the authors argue in the text. So on to my last question, which was question 3, which asks, which idea seems more accurate based on your own experiences? That communication reflects our identities, or communication constitutes our identities? So first off, the text states on page 114 that every culture has labels for people so that members can recognize them and have an idea of what to expect from them. It further states that this is based on the idea that people's actions will reflect their identity. Identity from the constitute perspective is described as something we do rather than something we inherently are, as seen as described on page 115. The next page explains that this perspective views a person as moving from one identity to another in an ongoing flow that is directed by our own communicative choices and the context we are in. I feel that communication constitutes our identities more accurately than reflects it. An example that I thought of was that when I'm at family functions and I'm hanging out with my siblings, I'm probably going to be loud, joking a lot, maybe a little inappropriate, depending on which siblings. But the moment that my daughter comes to me and she needs water, or she got hurt, or she's getting tired, my identity immediately moves into mom mode. And with this idea, I can see how what I'm doing and in the context is constituting my identity. So I definitely feel that communication constitutes more than